Hello and welcome to A Taste for the Road. My name is Scott and welcome to this 2008 Jaguar XK. So today we are in southern Maryland in the county of Calvert. We'll be heading over to a small town called Plata, which has a nice restaurant called the Charles that we'll be visiting for lunch here, as we always do on the project, and then finish out the review afterwards. We'll also be heading over to the historic town of Port Tobacco. So as its name would suggest, it was a port at one time and also transported tobacco. When, like a number of locations here in the DC area, when the railroad showed up, it heavily impacted quite a few port communities and it fell into disrepair. Now is the smallest number of residents in an incorporated town here in Maryland, a total of 13. So I think the great place to start with this particular Jag XK is really about how it makes you feel emotionally. Jags have historically been pretty good in that department, and this one does a pretty nice job as well. It just has that feel to it, whether it's the leather, the nice materials on the bottom half of the car, unlike, say, the F-Type, which does feel a little bit discounted. The steering wheel, which is nice and thin, it's just a traditional way of doing that, unlike some of the other brands from Europe that have just much thicker ones. The materials, the fit and finish, it just lends itself to just kind of feeling pretty good. This particular example has the British Racing Green metallic on the exterior, nice biscuit interior with some wood finishes, a little bit of aluminum, this nice shift gate here, if you will, this newer, well, for the period, L gate. Has a nice aluminum feel to it, and again, just helps you feel good about what you've chosen to ride in, and yeah, just enjoy your surroundings and whatnot. Speaking of the surroundings, the visibility in this car is really quite good as well. It's just nice to have a belt line that's more reasonable, and that you can go ahead and see under the corners and whatnot. Again, it just makes you feel relaxed and makes you feel at home, which is definitely appreciated. Something else here that's worth noting, aside from the performance, which of course, let's go ahead and enjoy that a little bit, celebrate it, is that this is the older version of it. By that I mean it's got the 4.2 liter V8, not the 5.0 or the supercharged model that the XKR offers. That came a few years later, that is the 5 liter. This at 300 horsepower at 6K and 310 foot-pounds of torque at around 4K still feels really quite potent. I would say satisfying and brisk, as opposed to something where you really feel as though you're being launched into the horizon. And it really fits this car very nicely, I think. Earlier today, I was on some very bumpy roads. They had been scarred up ahead of being paved. And every single time, no matter how gentle or no matter how harsh those bumps were, I definitely felt as though everything had just simply been softened off. This is a GT in the very classic sense, 2+2, although the rear seats aren't for anybody above probably 6 or 7, but will make a great location for putting some extra luggage, in addition to the hatchback, of which this is, that has quite a bit of actually luggage space capability or capacity in the back. But it just goes ahead and softens everything up. It's really nice, I think, for its intended role. The XKR, of course, more powerful, a little firmer suspension, but still, this just hits some really sweet and I think satisfying notes. The chassis, again, riveted and bonded aluminum, I should say. Again, just has a real feel. This car is actually about 6.5 inches longer and wider, and you would think therefore heavier than the older XK, but in fact, about 200 pounds less, at least in coupe form. Front and rear suspension's a little stiffer, but the poise and the feeling of still being very connected. The rear wheels definitely feel as though when you're turning, it's where they should be. You're pivoting left and right, which is also very satisfying. Something also worth celebrating is the noise that this smaller 4.2 liter V8 produces, whether it's the induction bark up front or the fine noises that come out of the rear of the car. It really does have just a sweet and nice sound to it. in conjunction with this 6-speed automatic transmission, which was actually a first for this category when it was released. The SL and BMW and Cadillac's product actually didn't have it. The Jag beats them by, I think, about 3 or 4 months, if memory serves me correctly. Really does set this car up very nicely. Some of the newer transmissions with 8 or 9 gears, definitely you feel that hunting, and that simply isn't the case here. So we are just outside of the town of La Plata. The human here could use a little bit of nourishment, and farm-to-table restaurants and good food are absolutely part of this project. So let's go ahead and head on into La Plata, have a proper lunch, and then afterwards hit some of these lovely back roads here in southern Maryland, in Calvert County, and go ahead and finish up this review. So I'll see you there. Well, that was a nice lunch at the Charles. I ended up deciding on a simple mescaline salad with some shrimp. We've got some very hot temperatures today. It's actually about 100 degrees, or I would guess probably about 33 or 34 degrees Celsius, and decided to keep it light. Ended up choosing a glass of dry Riesling as well. There's a little bit of room left. As some of you probably know by now, if you've watched more than one video, I have a very bad sweet tooth. They had some creme brulee cheesecake with a caramel sauce. That was a pretty rough go, but I went ahead and finished it off. And that was very nice too. There'll be a traditional written review of my 2 times that I've been on a tastefortheroad.com once this video drops below. So transitioning back to the XK here, and thinking about its competition, which are some of the usual suspects, the Mercedes SL, the 6 Series BMW, one from Cadillac as well. I think obviously the Mercedes and the 6 Series are more precise, as you might expect with a German product. I think frankly the Cadillac is an also-ran, and not really a terribly compelling value. But when you consider, what this does, this offers performance a little under 6 seconds, 0 to 60, electronically limited to 155. Again, I think what's telling here are the performance figures really from, say, 30 to 50, or from 50 to 70, or up to 90, depending on your jurisdiction, if that's legal, is where you really feel this lunging power and that motor, which, peak horsepower is at 6K. You can really feel that spool up and really kind of launch you forward in a nice way. I think where this car struggles in a couple of areas. One would be the interior a bit. Overall, it's a very nice place to be, but there are, as a consequence of some cheap plastics, those tend to glare out. Here in the console in the middle, there are a few other bits and pieces where I don't think it would have required a lot of extra cash to have them be aluminum instead. But overall, again, the cabin is a pretty nice place to be. In terms of reliability and so forth, I always check for that before I do a review like this. This is a surprisingly reliable car. The air conditioning evaporator tends to cause trouble, and depending on whether you go to the dealer or you take it to an independent Jaguar specialist, that runs, at least here in the States, around $800 to $1,000, maybe a little bit more, to go ahead and get that fixed. Because there's a big V8 up front, tends to chew up brakes sometimes, and if you're a lead foot in the back, it can shorten the lifespan of your rear tires. It tends to be a little bit sensitive to electronics, so a weak battery will definitely leave you stranded. It's definitely worthwhile to keep that charged up. But I was very impressed when I went through all the forums, reached out to some contacts as well. This is a very reliable car throughout its entire lifespan, from 07 through to 2015. Interesting little factoid too is that some of the service techs, independent as well as at the dealers, actually prefer working on this car to the F-Type. And the reason for that is because under the skin, this is built to a higher standard, and it is easier to work on and a greater pleasure when, again, you're got it up on a lift and you're doing various work to it. I thought that was interesting and worth passing along. And then I think where the topic of value is concerned, and I always include that in my reviews, searching on AutoTrader, looking elsewhere, and these can be had, not only the 4.2, of which this is obviously an example, but even the 5.0, where the standard car tends to trade at, I think, a deeper discount than it should. So this model, this range from 07 to shortly before the 5-liter came out, you can find really very nice examples in the 20s. I saw some that were about 20, 21, some really cherry models or examples around 30 or so, if you really wanted to push it for a newer one. But this represents, I think, at that price point, just a great deal, whether it's the classy clocks that have been staring at me all day. Ian Callum, who helped design, or did design, in fact, the DB7 and the DB9 also did this as well. And you can just see that when you walk around it and spend time with it. And then look at the DB7, which actually celebrates its 25th anniversary this year, and the DB9 as well. You can definitely see that lineage kind of permeating its way through this particular car. And just the classiness, the fact that it's quiet when it wants to be or when you want it to be, and throw it in auto and just let it do its thing. Or whether you want to be a little more rambunctious, you can obviously go ahead and play with the paddles, and that works pretty nice too. It's absolutely a car that if you're from London and you want to travel down to Nice, you could absolutely do that and be completely comfortable doing it. To use a more local example, from say here in the DC area down to Savannah, Georgia, maybe up to Quebec. If you're on the West Coast, obviously something from LA to Seattle and elsewhere. But it's really just, it's a very nice place to be. Obviously the R and the RS and heaven knows the GT at the very end of the lifespan have more power and more punch. But I think as a base car, and I like test driving and evaluating a manufacturer's base product, that it really does, in this case, generate a lot of really good vibes, and you feel good driving it. So I think that just about sums up this 2008 XK. It's been a real pleasure to be able to take it out for the day here in southern Maryland on some lovely twisty back roads. The weather's been, aside from being hot and humid, just really very, very nice overall as well, and get a chance to really get a feel for what this car has to offer. So I hope you found this video enjoyable. Give it a thumbs up if you can. Subscribe if you'd enjoy being alerted to new videos on tastefortheroad.com when they become available. Most importantly, please go out and create your own adventure, whether it's to see something that you do know in a new way or something completely new, and go ahead and share that with us in the comments below. It's really important for the community, and it'd be enjoyable to learn what you did. So with that, I think I will go ahead and bid you adieu, and I will see you in the next video. Ciao.